A very good evening and welcome to this week's edition of Bophelong, a place of hope. I am Pulem Molebatsi. So many of us witness the injustices and pain experienced by others, and sometimes you might toss a coin, make a donation or share a kind word, but a truly phenomenal woman did more than just that. Khanyi gave herself to over 100 children and became their mother. Let's see her extraordinary tale.
The story of Mama Khanyi begins in rural KZN, where she began her life, grew up, and began working as an administrator.
When I went to college, I went to do shorthand during our time. It was shorthand and typing, you see, and so I did that. And I also did my accounting, a bit of everything, and I worked, got experience. So I was working now in Northern Natal before coming here.
When rural KZN proved too violent for her, she made the decision to move to Johannesburg and later have her children join her in the city.
They were in boarding schools, and so I was working. So moving to Johannesburg, it was quite an experience for me. And also it was an experience for them when they joined me later. And with children, even if you are under a tree, as long as you are the mother, that is home for them. That is home for them.
When two of her eldest children were in university, Khanyi met a group of children that would change the course of her life forever.
I saw a group of children who were just standing there by the traffic light every day. They're just standing there chatting to each other, talking on top of their voices. What I didn't understand is why were they, because children were going to school. So what really interested me was the ages. 9, 10 years up, that caught my attention. The first time I approached them, I started walking straight to them. They noticed that I was coming straight towards them. They started mocking me. Some were saying, "Hey, are you a social worker?" And others saying, "Hey, you are too old. You want to join us? You are too old for this." And so I kept on walking towards them. When I came closer to them, I said, come, let me tell you something special. Some listened, some didn't even care. But those who just gave me an ear because they were inquisitive, I said, "You guys, you look so beautiful." And then they started laughing, saying, "Oh, Mom, thank you so much." So that's how I built the relationship. And so after work, I also went back to them again, saying the same thing. And that's when I gave them my address. That, "Guys, if you feel like having a cup of tea, just come to my flat." I went inside. But in the morning, the next day, bad timing, someone from the group said, "Mom, can you come for a cup of tea?" I looked at my time, but I said, "No, come in." The first two who came, I gave them tea and bread. They ate like they haven't seen food for some time.
At this point, Khanyi had formed a relationship with the children who, on one particular visit, fell asleep in her lounge. She decided to let them rest.
One woke up. She jumped because she just said, "Woo, we are late." She was waking up everyone violently, and she was busy fixing herself. Then I said, guys, I'm an adult. You are eating your soup and you are telling me, who are you? What is happening in your lives? Nobody wanted to talk. In fact, you could see that they were scared.
The truth was then revealed that the children were selling their bodies and drugs under the thumbs of drug lords and pimps.
My children were the first donors because whatsoever they were wearing, it was not decent. So they had to take bath, dress in fresh clothes. Now they started telling me about themselves. That's when I learned that the names they were using on the streets were not their real names. They didn't even know each other's surname. The end of that month, I was staying now with 16 children, 16. My neighbors were complaining because of the noise. The body corporate was complaining about the overcrowding. It was just hell. I was taken to court every now and then. That's when now we moved to Catalina Gardens. There I had to get 5 apartments, renting them, using the money from my company. And I was no more going to the office, but the family grew. Because at one time I stayed with 105 children at Catalina Gardens.
What would become of this brave woman who had taken upon herself to mother over 100 children that were not her own? And what about the children themselves? Would they ever find justice for the atrocities that they had encountered?
We learn more about how Mam Khanyi went on to create a home of safety and her love for these children right after the break. Stay with us. Welcome back to Bophelong. The story of Mam Khanyi of Home of Hope that today looks after 67 children continues in this next insert. Take a look.
Khanyi, founder and mother at the Home of Hope, talks about the home as a family that meets its members in a sad and shocking state of mind.
It's either in a brothel, or it's neglected, or it's abandoned, and it's being commercial sexually exploited. The one commercial sexually exploited, you must know the STIs. She doesn't understand her body. But now here is this person who's pushing her. That is something else again. So when you get a child like that, you don't have to be judgmental. You have to understand. So then those were the situations that one was facing.
She is grateful to nurses and clinics that gave special attention and empathy to the children of the Home of Hope.
Most of the children that you find in Hillbrow, Berea, inner city, anywhere, if you can just stand there and ask, where does the child come from? They are from all the provinces, very few from Johannesburg. Why? That is human trafficking. We have our own problem in South Africa, internal human trafficking. And why do we turn a blind eye? It's because we don't understand it. Or maybe it's because we don't care. It's not me, it's not my child. Why should I have to worry myself?
She cites poverty in rural areas as a factor for perpetrators to take advantage of when trafficking children for the use of selling their bodies, forcing them into labor and also using them to sell drugs. These are, according to the Human Trafficking Awareness Index, the driving factors for trafficking. With all this, Khanyi has a restored faith in the South African criminal justice system.
Last year alone, 2 cases. One case which was in Natal. Both of them were in Natal, but different towns. One, the perpetrator was given 28 years. I was so excited. In my 14 years operating, it was the first time that I really saw justice there. And number one, the officers, the police officers, they will call us on time, let us know about time when we need to go to court. You know, it was just the communication, working together. Okay, sometimes with us, we will not have fuel to drive there, but we will ensure that because we get the information on time, we will try to ask someone to help us with transport or anything. We take the child, we go there, we come back. It was almost 2 years doing the up and downs, but it paid off. And the other one, the perpetrator was given 23 years. So many people, you find that they know the children. So they might not know that the children are with you. But now if you expose the child, so it's even worse for the child. So it's better for us to work and not show the identity of the children.
The first group of girls that Khanyi met almost 14 years ago are now all grown up and studying at various universities. They are now the older sisters to the younger 67 children living with Khanyi at the home today.
Sometimes the state you find the child, you think, anyway, I've learned not to judge. I've learned not to look at the outside appearance. Because this child will change and be something very beautiful and very intelligent. I just thank God just for giving me that chance to respect the soul in the person.
More important are the morals that she bestows upon these children.
I'm using my indigenous knowledge, the way I was brought up as a girl, that you have to be yourself. If we teach them, the basics of life, the thank you and I'm sorry, how to handle yourself. So that helps us. That's why we don't fight. We talk. We don't shout at each other. We reason together.
In South Africa, 30,000 children under the age of 14 are trafficked and prostituted annually. This according to the International Organization for Migration report of 2013. Khanyi has done her share, but is it enough?
Such a brave act by Mekhanyisile Moza. If you would like to comment on the work of the Home of Hope and the story of Mekhanyisile, send us an email at bophelong@sabc.co.za, or you can tweet us, and our Twitter handle is Bophelong Show. And if you are keen to offer support to the Home of Hope, you can take a look at their website, www.hopehome.co.za, www.hopehome.co.za. And of course, after the break, I am joined in studio by a gender activist, Rosie Mudine. Stick around. Welcome back to Bophelong, and today we're discussing human trafficking. Joining me in studio is a gender activist, Rosie Mudine. Rosie, welcome to Bophelong.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
How are you?
Very, very good, thank you.
You look really pretty in red.
Thank you.
I was saying earlier on that you definitely outdid me.
No, never, never. Nobody can outdo your shine.
Okay, so let's just get down to the subject for today. We're discussing human trafficking. And Rosie, normally when we talk about human trafficking, people assume that it's only associated with human exchange for sexual purposes. There's more to that.
Yeah.
Please talk us through it.
You know, basically, in a nutshell, it's modern day slavery. It's for many, many years, for many, many centuries, women's bodies have been used in wars. They've been used in mass destruction. They've been used to prove points, to make statements. Example, the girls who have been abducted in Boko Haram. And it's not, yes, a lot of it, the human trafficking are used for prostitution, for sex clubs, for strip clubs and so forth. But there are also other areas that human trafficking is also being pushed through. And more importantly, in South Africa, people think it's not really happening here, and it's happening a lot on our shores.
And right in our backyard,
Yeah.
a lot of it is happening.
Yeah.
And which brings me to my next question is that normally the young girls that are involved in human trafficking, they're not even aware that they're being human trafficked.
Yeah.
Because you will see in most cases it's the mother who will sell the 5-year-old, not knowing what's going to happen to the baby. And you see the young girl being used for, labor or even sex. So how do we educate our children as young as they are about these things?
You know, also, I mean, it's a very, very important, very important fact, and that you mentioned children, but a lot of young women are also lured in. Women are targeted from underprivileged, from impoverished backgrounds, promised this wonderful world, promised this wonderful life, promised this wonderful experience, that you're going to get this job, you're going to be able to support your family, thinking that that's what they're going to get. Other instances, women who are already within the prostitution space are then being told, well, we're going to give you a better opportunity, you still will be prostituting, but then it's taken to another level where it's torture, it's abuse, it's all of these other things that are involved.
But how come the young women and the children out there are so easily targeted? What is it that they are not being resisted to?
We need to instill in our children what their rights are. Instill in them the sense of knowing what's right and what's wrong. You know,
so you mean from back home, you teach them the principles?
Right from the beginning. You know, like you and I, we know if we walk into a room and we get cold shivers, something is wrong with that situation. We listen to our intuition, and many times we're like, oh, we're overreacting. Listen to that intuition. So it's basically targeting the points of the children, saying, well, know who you are, find your inner strengths. If you feel a situation isn't right, talk about it, get an adult, find out, move away from the situation, you know, and also more important, instilling pride. Because if you instill in pride in a child in education, and you educate her, and she has that power, when somebody comes who's older and saying, well, I can get you so-and-so jewels or take you on this trip for this amount of money, in her mind, she's already got to know, well, if I want to get that, I need to work for that. And she needs to believe that. It's not just this instant gratification.
But then, you know, my biggest concern is that people, especially the young women that are involved in prostitution, for example, they would say, I'm in too deep. Can you be in too deep?
You know, you're in too deep in terms of the amount of drugs that they've been pumping into you. The fear of God.
And the fear,
the fear, that is the main thing. It's the fear of God that they've put into you. A lot of the time, the bribery and the fear that they're instilling, they're saying, well, we're not going to hurt you, but we know where your gogo lives, or we know where your child is. And it's out of that fear, and they don't want to betray their family, that young girls think that they cannot get out of the situation. But that's another thing, is that if you do know somebody that's in that situation, wants to get out, there is that protection factor. We can protect you in that way. Talk about it, and we need to then attack the kingpins.
The lady that's looking after over 100 children that were human trafficked, is Mekanyisile Modza. She says there isn't enough support out there, financial support, security. You know, for us to get the interview, we had to wait for weeks and weeks and weeks so that she can be protected before we could even interview her. So my biggest concern is, do the women like Mekanyisile get enough support if they've been brave enough to look after these girls?
You know what, the NGO sector in itself does not get enough support financially on all aspects. In 2010, approximately 300 NGOs had to close down in South Africa, purely because of that support. You know, this is where the government needs to take more stringent actions to support this, but also in terms of the lawsuits and the cases that happen. The rape cases of young children. As far as I knew, a couple of years ago in South Africa, there wasn't a charge against human trafficking, so you had to get around the law in terms of that.
It's still very new.
Yeah, so people know that they can get away with it. People know which border posts that they can then bribe the official. 5 passports can be passed and stamped without them even looking at who's actually going to be passing through the borders. You look at the border posts between Mozambique and South Africa. Yes, they've worked on making those a lot more safer and tighter. But a lot of the time, there are holes in the gates where an official will just turn a blind eye. It's a couple of $100 or whatever. Somebody can pass through. If somebody can pass through who's a refugee, it's just as easy for someone to send children through.
And also a lot of the bulk of the work that happens there, it happens in the country with, you know, South Africans themselves. They do it. You go to a township, especially, you know, for example, the squatter camp, you will find young girls that their mothers say, get into that car, it's okay, go with that man, he's going to give you 7 rand. And then the young girl thinks it's okay.
Yeah, and it's normal. But, you know, I also want to emphasize the fact that it's not only happening in the squatter camps. It's happening because there's a demand for children, girls of every color, creed, blonde hair, blue eyes, and so forth. So even in your shopping centers, you're walking with your children. Don't think it's okay to just leave them in the playground and go do your shopping. You know, unfortunately, we're not living in a community where it takes a village to raise our children, because we have uncles and brothers in the village who are raping our children. So watch your children. It is human trafficking, abuse, rape is not color specific. It's not religion specific. It's not creed specific. It can happen to anybody.
You know what I'm still always trying to wrap my head around is why women and children are the most targeted. And if you look at the Boko Haram and the 100 the 200 girls that are kidnapped, it's only young women.
Yeah.
How do we equip our girls with the skill to be resistant, to say, you're not going to grab me? Because, I mean, obviously, I bet when they are looking at a guy, they're saying, oh, well, he's going to be very physical and it's going to be a hassle. How do we equip our women with the skill that they need to be very resistant?
Well, you know, that's just the thing, and that's why groups like Boko Haram have risen up, because they've realized the strength of what an educated woman can do, what an educated nation of a female nation can do. So we got to keep on fighting, we got to keep on talking, we got to keep on having dialogues. But more importantly, the gender equality has got to start right at the beginning. So in the home, even to the extent of if there's going to be chores in the household, they shouldn't be broken up between boy and girl chores. If you have a son and a daughter, they both do the dishes. They both do the washing. They, you know what I mean? You create that. So you instill that sense of pride. Why do men are proud and believe that they have this bravado attitude? Because they've been told from an early age. For centuries, people have told them that. Media have an important role to play in that. The way they portray women in adverts, in movies and so forth. We need to curb down on that. We need to instill the sense of pride, and it's not arrogance, it's pride, confidence in knowing who you are.
So there's still a lot of work that we need to do on the groundwork with, you know, repositioning gender quality amongst the men and the women. What I wanted to also ask you was that with the women specifically, and specifically I'm going to refer it back to our inserts with Mam Khanyi. She went all out. She took the initiative to say, I'm going to bring all these girls into my home and do it out of the goodness of my heart. How come there aren't many women like her? You know, you spoke about having to challenge what's already out there, the message that already out there for the women. How do we get also us as women to come in and stick with other women as well that need our help the most?
You know, first of all, I salute a woman like that, because I've been working in the activism space for over 10 years, and when I started, I couldn't work with children purely because of the pain that you saw in their eyes. It takes a very special type of woman to be able to handle that strength and to be able to wake up in the morning and still live your life and help everybody else. So in terms of what other women and other men can do, if you're not an activist, we're not saying that you need to go galvanize and be marching in the streets, but there's always a way. So whether it's financial, whether it's supporting blankets, whether you know that you can aid in changing bills within Parliament, which is very, very important. If you see something happening, or you know, I mean, there are groups of well-known businessmen in our country who go and target young girls. They have flats all around Johannesburg. You know about these, report it. They don't need to know it's you. Report it. Don't turn a blind eye. So because more than likely it is happening to it's one of your daughters.
So be the voice to the voiceless, and then, you know, go out there and seek other ways of helping other young women as well.
And don't think it's a woman's issue.
Yeah,
you know, because human trafficking happens a lot with young boys, which a lot of those stories haven't been exposed yet. 2 years ago, almost 700 boys were found in France because they were lured there on a soccer tournament. You know, there's in terms of the sex traffic trade, it is a multi-billion-dollar industry. And it's underground, it's lethal, it's dangerous. So it's going to take a lot more than the mayor who's opened up her shelter. We need more of those, but at the same time we need people at the top, people who have power, people who have access to their power, people who have access to implementing change.
Yeah. And my last question would be, how, as many, I mean, people out there, they're probably watching us right now and they're wondering, where does she get the guts, the strength, the vocal ability to stand up for other women? How did you get into being, you know, being the activist that you are today?
I credit my mother and I credit my grandmother. Granted, I didn't really grow up with them, but now getting to know them in my adulthood, I see their strength and their resilience. So I credit that. And, you know, unfortunately for me, I was in an abusive relationship and it took a long time for me to get out. But then with me finding my strength, I realized that there were so many other people out there who didn't know that they have that strength or had that voice. So that's why I champion it.
Thank you so much, Rosie, for joining us this morning. As for me, that's how we wrap up our episode of Bophelong this week. You can catch the repeat tomorrow at 12:30. Remember to keep the conversation going on Twitter at Bophelong Show, or email us bophelong@sabc.co.za. Let's do this again. Let's do it. Goodbye.